The morning sun painted the Montana forest in golden light as Jake Morrison walked his usual patrol route. He had been a forest ranger for 8 years now, ever since he left the Army. The quiet woods helped heal the wounds that war had left on his mind. His boots crunched softly on the fallen leaves as he checked the trail markers and looked for any signs of trouble. Jake stopped to drink water from his canteen when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong somehow. It came from above, getting louder and louder. He looked up through the trees, but saw nothing at first. Then a bright streak of fire cut across the blue sky, moving faster than any plane he had ever seen. The object crashed into the forest about 2 miles north of his position. The ground shook under his feet and birds flew away in panic. Black smoke rose above the treetops. Jake grabbed his radio and tried to call it in, but only static came through. Whatever had crashed was big enough to knock out communications. His military training kicked in. Jake pulled out his compass and headed toward the crash site. As he got closer, he smelled something strange in the air. It was not like burning wood or gasoline. This smell was sharp and metallic, like hot copper mixed with ozone after lightning strikes. The trees became thinner as Jake approached the crash site. Many had been knocked down or burned by whatever had come down from the sky. He climbed over fallen logs and pushed through smoking brush until he reached a large clearing that had not been there that morning. In the center of the clearing lay the strangest thing Jake had ever seen. The crashed object was not a plane or helicopter. It was smooth and curved like an egg, but as big as a school bus. The surface looked like polished silver, but parts of it glowed with soft blue light. Steam rose from cracks along its sides, and that strange metallic smell was much stronger here. Jake approached carefully, his hand on the pistol at his belt. He had seen enough strange things in the Army to know that careful was better than sorry. As he got closer, he could see that part of the silver shell had broken open. Dark blue liquid leaked out onto the ground, steaming where it touched the earth. He walked around the damaged craft, looking for any sign of who or what might be inside. On the far side, he found an opening that looked like a doorway. The edges were smooth and clean, as if the door had opened by itself when the craft crashed. Jake pulled out his flashlight and shined it inside. The interior was like nothing he had ever imagined. The walls curved smoothly and glowed with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Strange symbols covered surfaces that looked like they were made of crystal and metal mixed together. But what caught his attention was the figure lying motionless on what looked like a bed or chair. Jake stepped inside, his boots making no sound on the strange floor. The figure was clearly not human, but it was shaped like a person. She was tall and thin, with skin that had a pale blue tint. Her hair was long and silver, spread around her head like spilled moonlight. She wore clothing that seemed to be made of the same material as the ship, flowing and changing color in the strange light. But what worried Jake most was the dark blue liquid pooling around her body. It was the same stuff he had seen outside, and it was clearly blood. The alien woman was badly hurt. Jake knelt beside her and checked for signs of life, the way he had been taught in Army medic training. Her chest rose and fell slowly, and when he touched her neck, he could feel a pulse. It was faster than a human heartbeat, but steady. She was alive, but she needed help soon. He looked around the inside of the craft, hoping to find some kind of medical equipment or first aid supplies. The walls were covered with panels that might have been controls, but they were dark and silent. Whatever power had run this ship was gone. Some panels were cracked, and more of that blue blood leaked from behind them. Jake made his decision quickly. This woman, alien or not, was hurt and needed medical attention. His cabin was only a mile away, and he had medical supplies there from his Army days. He could not fix whatever was wrong with her strange ship, but he could try to keep her alive. Carefully, Jake slipped his arms under the alien woman and lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, but her body was warm and felt real enough. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he could see that she had a cut on her forehead that leaked blue blood onto his jacket. The trip back to his cabin felt like it took forever. Jake had to stop several times to rest and to check that she was still breathing. Once she made a soft sound and her eyes opened for a moment. They were large and green like emeralds, and they looked at him with confusion before closing again. When Jake finally reached his cabin, he kicked open the door and laid the alien woman on his bed. She looked very small and pale against his dark blankets. He turned on all the lights and got his medical kit from the closet. It was not much, just basic army surplus supplies, but it was all he had. Jake cleaned the cut on her forehead first, using alcohol that made the blue blood foam and bubble. The wound was not deep and it stopped bleeding after he applied pressure with a clean cloth. He found 2 more cuts on her arms and treated them the same way. Her breathing was getting weaker, and Jake realized she might have internal injuries he could not see. All he could do was keep her warm, clean her wounds, and hope that whatever alien biology kept her alive was strong enough to heal itself. As night fell over the Montana forest, Jake sat in a chair beside his bed, watching over his strange patient. He had no idea who she was, where she came from, or what her presence might mean for Earth. But right now, none of that mattered. She was hurt, and she needed help. That was enough. Jake woke up before dawn, as he always did. He checked on the alien woman first thing. She was still breathing, but her skin felt too cold. He added another blanket over her, and built up the fire in his wood stove to warm the cabin. The blue blood on the bandages had dried to a dark purple color. Jake changed them carefully, cleaning each wound with warm water and antiseptic. The cuts were healing faster than he expected. Where human skin would still be raw and red, hers was already starting to close up. On the second day, she opened her eyes and tried to sit up. Jake gently pushed her back down and offered her water. She looked at the glass with confusion, then sniffed it before taking a small sip. Her face showed surprise and she drank more. She spoke then, but the words made no sense to Jake. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She pointed at herself and said something that sounded like Zara. Jake pointed at himself and said Jake. She repeated his name with a slight accent that made it sound exotic. Over the next few days, they worked on learning each other's language. Jake would point at things and say the English word. Zara would repeat it, then say the word in her own language. Water became aqua in her tongue. Fire was ignis. Food was nutrix. Jake noticed that Zara watched everything he did with intense interest. When he cooked breakfast over his wood stove, she studied how he controlled the heat by adjusting the ideal air vents. When he brought in firewood, she watched how he split the logs with an axe, her eyes following the precise movements. On the 4th day, Zara's strength was returning. She insisted on getting out of bed, though she was still weak. Jake helped her to a chair by the window where she could watch him work outside. She seemed fascinated by his daily routine of checking his equipment, maintaining his tools, and preparing for his forest patrols. That afternoon, Jake caught a fish from the stream near his cabin. Zara watched through the window as he cleaned and prepared it. When he brought it inside to cook, she gestured to see the knife he had used. Jake showed her the simple steel blade, and she ran her finger along the edge with amazement. She pulled something from her damaged clothing. It looked like a small device made of the same material as her ship. She touched it, and it glowed briefly before going dark again. She shook her head and made a sound of frustration. Jake understood that whatever it was broken. Jake tried to help by showing her how he sharpened his knife on a whetstone. The simple process seemed to amaze her. She watched as he moved the blade across the stone at just the right angle, testing the edge with his thumb. She pointed at the stone and said a word in her language, then at the knife, learning. When infection started in one of her deeper cuts, Jake knew he had to act fast. He had seen wounds go bad in the army, and he was not going to let this woman be on his watch. He gathered supplies his grandfather had taught him about: honey from wild bees, bark from willow trees, and leaves from plants that grew near the stream. Jake boiled the willow bark to make a tea that would help with pain and fever. He cleaned the infected wound with hot water and soap, then applied honey as an antiseptic. Zara watched with intense focus as he worked. When he was finished, she touched his hand and said something soft in her language. Jake did not need a translation to know she was saying thank you. The infection cleared up in 2 days. Zara's fever broke, and the wound began to heal properly. She seemed amazed by the simple treatments that had worked where her broken technology could not help her. Jake began teaching her practical skills while she recovered. He showed her how to start a fire with flint and steel, how to identify edible plants, and how to purify water by boiling it. Each lesson fascinated her more than the last. She learned quickly, her hands becoming skilled at tasks that had seemed impossible to her just days before. One morning, Jake found Zara outside the cabin trying to split firewood with his spare axe. She was doing it all wrong, raising the axe too high and bringing it down with poor aim. Jake showed her the proper technique, how to let the weight of the axe head do most of the work, how to aim for the natural cracks in the wood. After an hour of practice, Zara split her first log cleanly in half. The joy on her face was like watching a child succeed at something difficult for the first time. She held up the 2 pieces of wood and said, "Jake teach, Zara learn," in careful English. That evening, as they sat by the fire eating dinner, Zara began to tell Jake about her world. Her English was getting better each day, mixed with gestures and drawings in the dirt. She drew pictures of great cities that floated in the sky, of ships that traveled between stars, of her people who had forgotten how to do simple things with their own hands. She pointed to Jake and said, "Human strong, human no." Then she pointed to herself and said, "Zara, people weak. Zara, people forget." Jake understood that she was comparing her advanced civilization to his simple life and finding his way better in some important ways. Jake taught her to cook over the fire, to mend clothes with needle and thread, and to read the signs in nature that told of coming weather. Each skill seemed to fill a gap in her knowledge that all her advanced technology had never addressed. As the second week ended, Jake realized that Zara was no longer just his patient. She had become his student and in some ways his teacher too. She was showing him how remarkable the simple skills he took for granted really were. In her eyes, he was not primitive at all. He was something her people had lost the ability to be. He was truly self-sufficient. Far across the galaxy, King Velthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the star maps with growing rage. 3 weeks had passed since his queen's ship had been attacked by rebels. 3 weeks without word, without trace, without hope. The king was tall and powerful, with the same pale blue skin as his wife but broader shoulders and harder features. His silver hair was cut short in military style, and his green eyes burned with fury. Around him, his officers worked frantically, at control panels that glowed with soft light. "Report," Velthor commanded, his voice echoing through the vast bridge. General Krex, his military commander, approached with obvious fear. "My lord, we have searched 47 star systems. Our sensors have scanned every planet, every moon, every asteroid. There is no trace of the Queen's ship." Velthor's hands clenched into fists. "Then search 47 more. Search 400 if you must. I will not rest until she is found." The king turned to face his fleet through the massive viewing window. Hundreds of warships floated in perfect formation, each one capable of destroying entire worlds. Their hulls gleamed like mirrors in the starlight, covered with weapons that could crack planets in half. "Sir," another officer called out, "the computer systems have calculated over 10 million possible locations where the Queen's ship might have crashed. Even at maximum speed, it would take years to search them all." Velthor spun around, his cape flowing behind him. "Then we work faster. Double the search teams, triple them. I want every ship in the fleet looking. I want every sensor scanning. I want every computer calculating." The officers exchanged worried glances. They had never seen their king so desperate, so out of control. Velthor had always been calm and logical, making decisions based on facts and strategy. But his love for Queen Zara made him act like a wild animal. General Krex cleared his throat carefully. "My lord, perhaps we should consider the possibility that the Queen's ship was destroyed completely. The rebels had powerful weapons. There might be nothing left to find." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop 10 degrees. Velthor slowly turned toward the general, and every person present took a step back. The king's eyes glowed with dangerous light. "Are you suggesting that my queen is dead, General?" Velthor's voice was quiet, but it carried the promise of terrible punishment. "No, my lord. I only meant that we should prepare for all possibilities. Velthor grabbed the general by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The only possibility I will accept is finding her alive. Do you understand me? Yes, my lord, Krex gasped. The king dropped him and turned back to the star. Maps. Expand the search to primitive systems, places we would normally ignore. The rebels might have chosen a world so backward that our sensors would overlook it. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake was teaching Zara how to track animals through the forest. They walked quietly along a deer trail, Jake pointing out hoofprints in the soft mud and broken twigs where the animals had passed. See how the grass is bent here? Jake whispered, kneeling beside the trail. This tells us a deer walked through about 2 hours ago. The grass is still trying to stand up straight. Zara knelt beside him, studying the bent grass with the same intensity she had once reserved for star charts and battle plans. Human eyes see much, she said in her improving English. Zara people use machines to see. Forget how to look with eyes. Jake smiled and stood up. My grandfather taught me this when I was 7 years old. He said machines can break, but your eyes and brain will always work if you know how to use them. They continued through the forest, Jake showing her how to read the signs that nature left everywhere. Bird calls that warned of predators, clouds that promised rain, the direction of the wind that carried scents and sounds. Zara absorbed every lesson like a student who had been starving for knowledge. She practiced identifying plants, learning which ones could heal wounds and which ones were poisonous. She learned to feel changes in air pressure that meant weather was coming. Why Zara people forget these things? She asked one afternoon as they sat by a small waterfall. Jake thought carefully before answering. Maybe because when life gets easy, people stop learning hard things. When machines do everything for you, you forget how to do anything for yourself. Zara nodded sadly. Zara people have machines for everything. Machine to cook food, machine to clean clothes, machine to heal wounds. We become like children who never grow up. That evening, as they prepared dinner over Jake's wood fire, Zara talked more about her home world. She drew pictures in the dirt of great floating cities, of people who lived their entire lives without ever touching natural ground or breathing natural air. We have forgotten the taste of real food, she said, taking a bite of the fish Jake had caught that morning. Everything comes from machines that make it perfectly safe and perfectly boring. Jake laughed. This fish might have parasites. The vegetables might have dirt on them. Nothing's perfectly safe out here. Yes, Zara said with a smile. That is why it tastes like living. Back in space, King Velthor was becoming more desperate with each passing day. His search fleets had grown to over 1,000 ships scouring the galaxy for any sign of his missing queen. Planets that refused to be searched were threatened with destruction. Several worlds had already been conquered just to examine their surfaces more closely. My lord, a young officer approached nervously. We have found a small debris field in the Kappa sector. It contains metal that matches the composition of the Queen's ship. Velthor rushed to the scanner displays, his heart pounding. The debris was tiny, just a few fragments floating in empty space, but the computer confirmed it was from his wife's vessel. The trail leads toward a small yellow star with several planets, the officer continued. The system is listed as primitive, with only one world showing signs of life. Set course immediately, Velthor commanded, and prepare the invasion fleet. If anyone on that world has harmed my queen, they will pay with their civilization. The massive fleet turned toward Earth's solar system, their engines burning bright against the stars. In just a few days, they would arrive at the small blue planet where their queen was learning to split firewood and catch fish with her bare hands. 1 month after the crash, Zara's wounds had completely healed. She moved through Jake's cabin with confidence now, helping with daily tasks and learning new skills every day. Jake had grown used to her presence, and the cabin felt strangely empty when she went outside to practice the survival techniques he had taught her. That morning, Zara was unusually quiet as she helped Jake prepare breakfast. She kept looking at him with an expression he could not read. Finally, she put down the pan she was washing and turned to face him. Jake, she said carefully, Zara must tell truth. Important truth. Jake sat down at his small wooden table and gestured for her to join him. What kind of truth? Zara pulled out the broken device from her clothing, the one she had been trying to fix for weeks. This time, when she touched it, it flickered to life for a few seconds. Strange symbols appeared in the air above it, glowing softly before fading away. Zara is not just person from stars, she said slowly, choosing her words with care. Zara is queen. Queen of many worlds, many people. Jake stared at her for a long moment. A queen. He had been sharing his one-room cabin with alien royalty for a month, and she had been washing dishes and splitting firewood like any other person. A real queen? He asked. Zara nodded. Queen Zaraneth of Velthari Empire. Husband is King Velthor. Empire has 1,000 worlds, billion people. Jake leaned back in his chair trying to process this information. So you're like really important then? Yes, very important. People bow when Zara walks by. People build statues of Zara. People live and die by Zara's words. She looked around the simple cabin with its rough wooden walls and basic furniture. But here Zara just helps Jake with chores. Yeah, well, everyone has to do chores, Jake said with a shrug. Queen or not, dishes don't wash themselves. Zara smiled at his reaction. This is why Jake is special. Jake learns Zara is queen, but Jake does not change. Still treats Zara like regular person. You are a regular person, Jake said. Being in charge of stuff doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just makes you responsible for more people. That afternoon, as they walked through the forest, checking Jake's trap lines, Zara continued her story. She told him about the attack on her ship, about the rebels who wanted to overthrow her husband's rule, about the advanced technology that had failed when she needed it most. Zara's people have medicine machines that can heal any wound in minutes, she explained. But machine needs power, needs special materials, needs other machines to make it work. When ship crashed, all machines broken, useless. Jake nodded as he reset a rabbit snare. But you healed anyway. Yes, because Jake used old ways, simple ways. Jake cleaned wounds with water and soap. Jake used honey like medicine. Jake used plants from forest. No machines needed. They came to a small clearing where Jake had been teaching Zara to identify medicinal plants. She knelt down and picked a handful of willow bark, the same kind Jake had used to make tea when her infection got bad. This little tree bark saved Zara's life, she said, holding it up to the sunlight. Not billion-credit medical machine, tree bark and human knowledge. Jake sat down on a fallen log. My grandfather always said the old ways work because they've been tested for thousands of years. If something didn't work, people stopped using it. What survived is what actually helps. Zara sat beside him, still examining the bark. Velthari, Empire is 1,000,000 years old. But we stopped learning old ways after just few thousand years. We thought machines were better. Are they better? Jake asked. For some things, yes. Machines can do things no person could do alone. But machines make people weak. Make people forget how to take care of themselves. She looked at Jake with admiration. Jake can survive anywhere. Jake needs no machines, no power, no special materials. Jake is truly free. That evening, as they cooked dinner over the fire, Zara told Jake stories about her empire. She described cities that floated in the clouds, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, weapons that could destroy stars. But with each story, she seemed sadder rather than proud. Sounds amazing, Jake said, turning the fish on his simple cooking grill. Is amazing, Zara agreed, but is also trap. People live in beautiful cities but never see real sky. People travel to 1,000 worlds but never walk in real forest. People have everything they want but forget what they need. Jake considered this as he watched the fire dance under their meal. What do they need? What Jake taught Zara: how to make fire, how to find food, how to heal wounds, how to read signs in nature, how to take care of self and others without machines. She stirred the wild vegetables Jake had taught her to identify. These things make person strong inside, make person really alive. But you're going back, right? Jake asked quietly. When your people find you? Zara was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled between them, and night sounds filled the forest around Jake's cabin. Finally, she spoke. Zara is queen. Have duty to people. Must return. She looked at him across the flames. But now Zara knows what empire is missing, what all advanced people are missing. What's that? Connection to real world. Knowledge of simple things that keep people alive. Wisdom that comes from working with hands, thinking with heart. She gestured around the cabin at the tools Jake had made and maintained, at the food they had prepared together. This is what makes humans strong. This is what Velthari Empire needs to learn. Jake poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the dark sky. Think your husband would be interested in learning how to split firewood? Zara laughed, but then her expression grew serious. Velthor is proud king, powerful warrior, but maybe, if he sees how primitive human saved his queen, maybe he will listen. High above them, invisible against the stars, the first ships of the Velthari fleet entered Earth's solar system. The morning sky above Montana began to change. What looked like new stars appeared in the daylight, growing brighter and larger by the hour. Jake noticed them first while he was chopping wood outside his cabin. Zara, he called, you might want to see this. Zara came outside and looked up at the strange lights in the sky. Her face went pale, and she spoke a single word in her own language that sounded like a curse. What is it? Jake asked, though he was already afraid he knew the answer. Velthor, she whispered. My husband has found me. The lights in the sky grew into shapes that hurt Jake's eyes to look at directly. Hundreds of ships, each one larger than a city, descended through Earth's atmosphere. They moved silently, their hulls gleaming like mirrors in the sunlight. The largest ship was the size of a mountain, bristling with weapons that could level entire countries. Jake felt his heart racing. He had seen enough military action to recognize an invasion force when he saw one. How many people are up there? Millions, Zara said quietly. Velthor brought entire battle fleet. The massive ships positioned themselves above the forest, blocking out the sun. Smaller craft began to separate from the main fleet, heading toward Jake's cabin like hunting hawks diving toward prey. He thinks you're in danger, Jake realized. He's coming to rescue you. Yes, and he will destroy anything he thinks hurts Zara. She grabbed Jake's arm. Velthor is good king, but when angry he does not think clearly. He sees human with alien. Queen, he will assume human is enemy. Jake looked at his simple log cabin, his basic tools, his small clearing in the vast forest. In a few minutes, it would be filled with alien soldiers armed with weapons beyond imagination. And he was just one man with a hunting rifle and military training from 20 years ago. What do we do? He asked. Before Zara could answer, the first landing craft touched down in the clearing where her ship had crashed weeks before. The craft was sleek and deadly looking, covered in the same mirror-like material as the larger ships. A door opened, with a sound like singing metal, and figures began to emerge. King Velthor stepped out first, and Jake understood immediately why this man ruled an empire of 1,000 worlds. The alien king was tall and powerful, wearing armor that seemed to be made of living light. His green eyes burned with fury and desperation, and the weapon in his hand glowed with enough energy to vaporize a tank. Behind him came dozens of soldiers, each one armed and armored like a walking fortress. They moved with perfect precision, spreading out to surround Jake's cabin. More landing craft arrived, disgorging hundreds of additional troops. Zara. Velthor's voice boomed across the forest, amplified by his armor systems. Where are you? What has happened to you? Zara took a deep breath and stepped out of the cabin. Jake followed her, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. He had no desire to start a war between Earth and an galactic empire. When Velthor saw his wife, he froze completely. Jake could see the alien king's mind struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. Queen Zaraneth stood in front of a primitive wooden structure, wearing simple earth clothes that Jake had given her. Her hair was braided in a practical style, and her hands showed the calluses that came from real work. But what shocked the king most was her appearance. Zara looked healthier and more vibrant than she had in years. Her skin glowed with vitality, her eyes were bright and alert, and she moved with a confidence that palace life had never given her. "My queen," Velthor said, his voice much quieter now. Are you well?" "Yes, husband. Zara is very well." She gestured toward Jake. "This is Jake Morrison, human who saved Zara's life." Every alien weapon in the clearing turned toward Jake. He could feel the heat from energy beams that were barely held in check. Hundreds of alien soldiers waited for their king's command to turn the primitive human into ash. Velthor approached slowly, studying Jake with the intensity of a predator examining prey. "This creature saved you?" "Yes." "When Zara's ship crashed, all machines broken. Zara was dying. Jake used human knowledge to heal wounds, cure infection, make Zara strong again." The king looked back and forth between his wife and the simple human, who had somehow accomplished what the Empire's most advanced medical technology could not have done in the wilderness. "Show him," Zara said to Jake. Jake walked over to his woodpile and picked up his axe. Several alien soldiers raised their weapons, but Zara held up her hand to stop them. Jake demonstrated the proper technique for splitting wood, the same technique he had taught Zara weeks ago. Jake taught Zara to make fire without machines, she continued. Jake taught Zara to find food in forest. Jake taught Zara to make medicine from plants. Jake taught Zara to survive with only hands and knowledge. Velthor watched in stunned silence as his wife demonstrated the skills Jake had taught her. She started a fire using flint and steel, identified edible and medicinal plants, and showed how to purify water by boiling it over flames. "These are things Velthari people have forgotten," Zara explained to her husband. "We depend on machines for everything. But Jake's people, they remember old wisdom. They can survive anywhere, need nothing but their knowledge and skill." The alien king looked around the simple clearing, at Jake's basic tools and handmade furniture, at the garden where food was grown from seeds planted in dirt. Everything was primitive by his empire's standards, but it all worked. It was all functional. It was all real. "You did this?" Velthor asked Jake directly. "You healed my queen using these simple methods?" Jake nodded. "Yes, sir. Wasn't easy, but we managed." "The infection that nearly killed me," Zara added. "Jake cured with tree bark and honey. No machines, no advanced medicine. Just human knowledge passed down through generations." For the first time in his long life, King Velthor found himself truly speechless. This primitive human had succeeded where his empire's greatest achievements would have failed. Not through superior technology or advanced science, but through wisdom, skill, and the simple human trait of caring for another living being. "Perhaps," the king said slowly, "there are things your people could teach mine." Jake looked up at the massive fleet floating overhead, then back at the powerful alien ruler. "Well, splitting firewood is a pretty good place to start."